I usually have a 10-year roadmap of what I
Mhm.
want to be at the end of 10 years. And achieving those also helps me and gives me a sense, it's like a project management mode. Part of being centered is having the confidence and the ability to walk away from a conflict where you feel that you're not going to gain anything from the upside. Your values are aligned and you're never really expected to do stuff that doesn't gel with your values. So, like I said, a conflict is a conflict only if you can't walk away from it. You should never leave a job because someone else wants you to. So, you should prioritize and say, what is it that I really want to be best at this point in time?
Mm.
Choose which metric matters most, focus on that. Say 5 years, this is going to be my focus.
Okay, so today we have with us Jessie Paul, Managing Director of Paul Writer. And Jessie has 25 years of experience in marketing, always on a tight budget, she says. So she was a global brand manager of Infosys during its hectic growth era of the late 90s and early 2000s. She headed marketing for a challenger brand iGate, now a part of Capgemini. She went on to be a chief marketing officer of Wipro Technologies for 5 years, during which it quadrupled its revenue to 4 billion US dollars. So in 2010, Jessie founded Paul Writer, a marketing advisory firm, and they work with global and Indian clients to maximize marketing impact through consulting and content strategy. She's an independent director on the boards of Bajaj Consumer Care, Expleo Solutions, CreditAccess Grameen, and Royal Orchid Hotels. Her book, No Money Marketing From Upstart to Big Brand on a Frugal Budget, was published by Tata McGraw Hill and was based on her experience of putting Indian brands on the global map. She's now refining her thoughts on frugal marketing in the digital era for a book to be published by Bloomsbury in 2021. And she writes a weekly newsletter called Marketing Booster. It has been running for 480 weeks, so 9 to 10 years, and has over 30,000 readers. I am one of them. And I have read a lot of them and found them useful, relevant, and very to the point and thought provoking, and to whatever is going on in the world that time. And she holds an MBA from Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, and a bachelor degree from National Institute of Technology, Trichy. I have the privilege of knowing Jessie from her college times at IIM Calcutta. So thank you, Jessie, for joining us.
Thanks so much, Rohan, for having me as a guest here. And it's awesome to see you again after all these years as well. But of course, we've been in touch through our mutual newsletters.
So, as I shared with you, this show is focused on learning through stories, real life stories and kisse kahaniyan, and in your signature style. Okay, so tell us a bit about your personal life journey beyond all these accomplishments.
Personal life journey is actually very similar to a lot of people in India. Small town origins. So I grew up in a little town called Nazareth, which had around 1 lakh population. And biggest aim of a lot of people there and mine was actually to get out of the small town. So first accomplishment is that I've managed to do that, and I think that's one of the biggest goals. And the only way you could leave was through education. And given the kind of network you have in a small town, it was really you could be doctor, engineer, maybe lawyer, otherwise you can be teacher, nurse, and that's pretty much what we have to offer. So that's actually what propelled me saying, okay, fine, I don't like medicine, let me do engineering, and that's actually what moved me forward there. So personally, I think the sense of accomplishment is to do with overcoming some of the challenges of studying in a small town and moving forward from there, and also being a part of India's growth story, because
Mhm.
I like to say that I'm a liberalization child because we graduated in 92. And I'm pretty sure my story would not have been the same had I graduated, a couple of years earlier or a couple of years later. So tracking that is very interesting journey because I think, Our generation still had to provide money to the parents or support to the parents, but you're pretty much the last generation, hopefully, which will have to do that. And that also gives you a lot of degrees of freedom that perhaps we did not have. But at the
Mm,
same time, anyone who graduated around that time, huge benefits in terms of being part of, a tremendous growth journey, both financially and personally.
okay. So, what would you consider as one of the few proud moments or key milestone in your journey of last few years?
So there have been lots. One is, I think financial independence comes really near the top, because
Mm,
it gives you something which I like to talk a lot about and which I learned from one of my previous bosses and mentors, which is, you can control a lot of your variables. So the more of your variables that you can control, the more, sense of control you have over your destiny.
mm,
So financial independence definitely is a very big milestone. Starting my own business was a huge step, and I always wanted to try it, but I didn't know whether I would have the courage to do it. So definitely, that was a big sense of achievement as well. Then we recently celebrated 25th wedding anniversary. So again, you never think when you marry a batchmate that you're actually going to become what at the time we would have thought is an old person who's been married for 25 years. So I think that was also a very big achievement. And along the way, there have been lots of little, goals that have been achieved. And something I like to kind of share with others is that I usually have a 10-year roadmap of what I
mm,
want to be at the end of 10 years. And achieving those also helps me and gives me a sense, it's like a project management mode. So that's also pretty cool for me.
mm. Okay, so give me a little more insight on what was going on in your head where on with respect to financial independence. How what was the narrative in your head?
So I didn't actually have a narrative saying I want to be financially independent, but I had a colleague, and this was an iGate, and we used to talk about retirement, which at the time seemed so far away. And he said, Jesse, if you say that I must have so much of money to retire, then you'll be working forever. So if you say
Mm,
that, I must maintain my lifestyle and therefore I need so much, and it keeps changing every year, right? So you
mm,
have one
mm,
car, it becomes, can I have a car and a driver? And then it becomes that car. So the material goals, you can keep on saying, I want more and more. And
mm,
very few people actually, are able to retire and manage everything, that they
mm,
want.
mm,
So
mm,
his approach, which I thought was very kind of pragmatic, was to say that why don't you say that, look, I want to be financially independent or retire at a certain age, or not work for money or because you have to.
mm,
And at that age, you say, okay, this is what I have, and therefore I will cut my cloth according to what I have
mm,
and adjust my lifestyle accordingly.
mm,
So I thought that was great advice where you say that, look, I'm not going to strive forever. I want to settle with what I have. But if I can get a lot of what I have, that's great. So that was one thinking. The other is a realization that, I don't really want to retire.
yes.
And I've seen examples of people who retired prematurely, like, at 70 also now, if you retire, you're bored because you're active up to 90, and, you have no mental stimulation. So the caveat that I now have is I don't want to be in a position where I have to work for money, but I also don't want to be in a position where I do nothing at all. The
Mm,
what I do could keep evolving, and I want to have the freedom to choose that. But the like when you were 20 years old, the thought of retirement seems so appealing. Nothing to study, nothing to do. But I kind of enjoy what I do, so I want to continue working, till I am able.
mm. So I would like you to. So from outside, you see a woman who's really centered, who can do a whole lot of things, and who can speak to a large crowd, conduct these large CMO tables. I have heard you doing. So behind all of this, there would be you have a very strong root and soil system. So I would like you to throw some light on what is going on inside.
So I think it depends partly on your internal locus of control and your
Mhm.
external locus of control. And I actually enjoy talking to an audience, and I always have. So even in IIM Calcutta, I certainly was not, academically like anywhere near the top, but I was popular as a team member because of presentation skills, and that actually helped a lot. And I also got my first job after engineering because I was asked to speak to the head of R&D, and I got the job because he said, we should give her a job because she can talk about anything. So I enjoy the conversation of speaking with people. It's intellectually stimulating. So that's not really something, I would kind of praise in that sense. But um, so that's the external locus. I enjoy the audience, I enjoy the rewards. But from an internal locus, like I said, I do like to feel that I'm in control of the situation. And there, your family and friends have a lot to contribute.
Mhm.
So my husband, who, I met on day one of being in IIM Calcutta campus, and we've pretty much stayed together ever since, does a lot in terms of giving me the confidence that you can go out and try everything, and it doesn't matter if it works out or not. So I think it's very useful to have an intellectual equal as your partner.
Mhm.
And as you get older and more senior and so on, I do sometimes wonder, how do people manage who don't have somebody to have this equal conversation with
Yeah.
about anything possible.
Yes.
So I think that is a big part of the roots. And then, of course, the extended family, my in laws, my parents, all of them also. It's a very supportive ecosystem. And, we were talking about this when we did our pre call also, that
Mm.
part of being centered is having the confidence and the ability to walk away from a conflict where you feel that you're not going to gain anything from the upside.
Mm.
But not many people, and certainly not a lot of women, have that ability. So the intent may be there, but the ability isn't there. And I
Mm.
think some of that is grounded with, the values that my parents gave, that you don't have to be dependent on someone or
Mm.
care so much about what others say.
Mm.
So I think that's super important. And then comes, the family support, etc. And then the financial independence of not having to put up with rubbish. But I also think the companies that I work with supported that. And um, like when I was in my first post MBA job in Ogilvy and Mather, there was a client who I felt was disrespectful, not just to me, but to, agency people in general. And I went back to my boss and complained and said, look, I don't want to deal with him. And I'll do all the work, but I'm not going to talk to him unless he apologizes.
Mm.
So Ogilvy actually had a discussion and said, yeah, we agree with you. We'll back you up on this. And for a whole week, my account was run without me having to personally deal with this client. And
Mm.
this was before, video calls and stuff. So physically, people were running meetings on my behalf, etc.
Mm.
And then they agreed to apologize. And then it was
Mm.
all fine. But the thing is, your organization also has to back your values. So, and I think, I've been really lucky to have worked with an Infosys and a Wipro where your values are aligned and you're never really expected to do stuff that doesn't gel with your values.
So let me take you back to your childhood. What would you call as your biggest childhood challenge? Any story from there?
So, as I mentioned, I grew up in a small town, but
Mm.
not entirely true because, so my dad worked for the Indian Foreign Service.
Okay.
So, I did up to second grade in Delhi, and then he got posted to Sydney, Australia.
Okay.
And so 4 years there, and that was pretty interesting, okay, because this was again before the internet and everything. We literally were expecting sheep and kangaroos on the streets of Sydney. Um, So, it was a bit of an adjustment. You go from a 70s India to a very huge and happening city like Sydney. Also, dealing with things like racism and all was a bit of a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And you pretty much had to deal with it alone because your parents weren't dealing with it. And in school, it was just such a commonplace thing. So that was kind of an interesting experience. But then when we came back to India, my dad had retired, and so grade six was in this little town called Nazareth. And the only language possible as a second language was English. So there was an English medium school, but you had to do Tamil.
Okay.
And I barely spoke the language. I mean, people are like mother tongue, mother tongue. I'm like, yeah, my mother speaks it. That's about right. So that was actually one of the big challenges of, entering grade six and having to learn Tamil from scratch. But it
Mm.
wasn't just the language; it was also none of the kids related, and I was just very alien kind of a creature. So people used to follow me home and shout my name and stuff like
Wow.
that. So that was
Mm.
pretty interesting 1 year of adjustment, if not more. But for a long time, I actually struggled with the subject. So my teachers would have to tell me that this is what the question means. Now, if you can just somehow manage to mug up the answer and write it, nothing like it.
Okay. Oh, so how did you handle those things that, as you said, someone shouting your name from behind at that age and with no one really to guide or mentor? So how did you manage those things?
Yeah, so you don't manage, you just live with it. You have no choice. So it is pretty awkward, and you try different routes home and so on. I mean, my dad would have escorted me home every day, but I didn't really want that either, right? You're the
Mm,
only, teenager being escorted home every day types. So you just deal with it. You have no choice. And I think in some ways it helps you to deal with other situations later. So,
mm,
um, Tamil Nadu eve teasing was common, still
mm,
is, I believe. So, when I had to come home from college, it was 14, 15 hours by Mufassal buses, and you had to change buses in the night, everything.
mm,
All this teaches you to be pretty thick skinned. So, I've actually been followed in New York, followed in Delhi, and you deal with it because you have to. So, not a very sheltered kind of an approach.
mm,
And
mm,
it's a life experience which does help you to deal with adversity later.
mm. Maybe it somewhere made you stronger in at some level at core. I don't.
Maybe, but it also, so you develop a bit of a shell, and you don't perhaps, you don't assume that everybody is your friend.
Understood. So, can you share one or two events which you can actually say there would be many, but which shaped Jessie's personality and made Jessie who she is? Some core ones.
So one of the core tenets, and I talk about it, is something very young. So I think would have been probably seven or something, and we had
Mm,
gone to this big embassy party,
okay.
and the Indian ambassador and his wife were sitting on a dais, and they looked very impressive, at the time. And I was like, I want to shake their hand. And so my dad was like, "Yeah, go ahead, go up and say you want to shake their hand." So I'm like, "No, you have to take me." And I could see other parents, escorting the child and
Mm,
saying, "Uncle,
mm,
meet him." My dad was like, "No, no, no. You want something? Go ask for it." So I was essentially the only child who had to go up alone and say, "Hello, I want to shake hands," and they were super nice and sweet about it. And that I think was a big lesson that when you ask, sometimes you get. So later
yeah.
on, I used to collect stamps, and I remember I didn't have the stamp of Liechtenstein. And this was also, the royalty craze was on because Princess Diana had, gotten married and stuff.
Mm.
So I discovered that there was also a prince of Liechtenstein. So my dad's solution is, you want a stamp, why don't you write to them and say, hey, I'm from your
Ah.
country, send me a postcard with a stamp on it. And they replied, and you feel so happy. So then I was like, hey, I'll write to Complan, I'll write to WWF, I get the stickers. But I think that it's not a typical Indian advice to the daughters, at least, that you could
Mm,
get whatever you want.
mm,
And later on, so my campus placement from IIM Calcutta was Reliance, but I really wanted to be in advertising.
Hmm.
So I went door to door looking for a job. I literally went up and down MG Road, Bangalore, knocked on all the ad agencies and said, I want a job.
Okay.
Um, and I've actually never been headhunted for a job. I've always cold called into a job.
Wow.
And I think it's, the same philosophy that, hey, what's the worst they can do? They can say no.
And if I'm just thinking that where would you have moved to if you had stayed on to the original job versus what your passion was, and you could one, you had that clarity that I wanted, and second, the determination that I will get it.
Yeah.
So, so I think that is very, very interesting. And okay, so what would you call as a turning point in your life?
Infosys was amazing on two fronts. One was the experience. The second, obviously the mentors that I had, the people I worked with, all of that was fantastic. But it also gave me stock options.
Hmm.
And so one of the big decisions I had to make when I quit Infi was, would I walk away from half of the stock options? And I did. And the decision has two consequences. One is, of course, I did make a decent amount of money thanks to Infosys, and that shaped the ability to go out and do slightly offbeat things thereafter.
Mm.
Right. So when you don't have to worry about loans to repay, it gives you a sense of freedom. And, forever I'd be grateful to Infosys for allowing me to do that. I'm not sure I would have become an entrepreneur if I hadn't had the Infi ESOPs backing me kind of that way. The second was that I had to take a decision of walking away from around 50 lakhs worth of ESOPs, which at the time was a huge amount of money.
This was
And
like 2000. When was it?
this was 2003.
Ah, ah, ah.
Right. And Mr. Murthy actually found out that, I had stock options left and they would mature in less than a year, actually, it would have been. So he actually came and made this wonderful offer. He said, look, I know you want to join a startup. I know which one it is. And I know that, you want to, the excitement, I have nothing against it. I'm actually okay. You can withdraw your resignation and, you know, keep the ESOPs and leave after they have vested. You can withdraw. I will let you withdraw because there's a huge amount of money that you're walking away from, and the startup will still be there.
Mm, mm,
So I thought that was a very, very generous and very high-minded offer. But I still thought about it and felt that if I stayed back for a year, I would miss the entire fun of the startup. In retrospect, the startup also got bought within that time frame, so I wouldn't have enjoyed it as a little startup. And I said, look, I have to choose between pursuing a job I really like and chasing money. And I took a call and said, I'm going to follow my heart, not chase the money. And in retrospect, if I had not walked away at that time, taken that particular job, I don't think the Wipro CMO job would have been open to me at a later time. So
mm,
everything falls into place when you can actually walk away from money. So
mm,
I also turned down my campus job because, I mean, Reliance was going to pay double what I finally made in advertising, a little
mm,
bit more than double, in fact.
mm,
But I was so clear that I wanted to do advertising. And if I hadn't done my stint in advertising, I would not have been an attractive recruit for Infosys.
mm,
Infosys,
mm.
though they paid me double what I made in Ogilvy, I was still at the bottom of the ladder. And HR was like, we can't pay you more than double. I'm sorry. It's your problem. You came from advertising. Right?
Mm,
So I think if I have a takeaway to offer, it is try to walk away from money and remove that from the equation when you make your decisions.
mm. Okay, and walk towards what you love.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah, and it's very interesting that you've done it few times, not just one coincident.
Well,
And
once it works out, then you have the confidence that, yeah, okay, let me try
ah,
it again.
okay, yes. So
Right?
so Also, I think I had that question pending in my head, is that how was this shifting from corporate world to being an entrepreneur, creating Paul Writer? Give me a little, description of that. What was going on in your head? How did you take a call? Uh,
So I had, like I said, I had a discussion with one of my mentors, and he always said that, So I said, "Oh, I want to be CEO of a company," and this was a bit of a challenge because in IT services, there's no way, someone was going to make me CEO. And I really had no desire to be a P&L owner in the IT industry. I
mhm,
was offered, and I'm like, no, because being a good marketer is fine, but that doesn't mean I have the same skill sets to be a good P&L owner.
mm, mm,
Plus, frankly, I would find it boring.
mm,
But I still wanted to be a CEO. And then he was like, okay, have you thought about the kind of company that you want to be CEO of? I was like, no, not really. I just want to be CEO.
mm.
And how many employees, would this company have? I said, I don't really care. Wonderful. You can start your own business. Right? So that actually was good thought, and I did it around 6 years later. But it was a good thought to have that if that's what you really want to enjoy, then you go out and figure out what you want to do. In terms of what would this business do, I had a little help from Rama Bijapurkar,
Mhm.
and the framework we used was actually a Jim Collins framework where
Okay.
you have a Venn diagram where you put in your passion, um, perfection, that is anything that you could be really good at if you
That.
tried,
Mm,
and the third circle is profitability, and then
mm,
where all three join up is your ideal sweet spot.
mm, mm,
So I couldn't actually find any one thing, but I found three things that kind of fit the bill and had some connection. And
mm,
that is, how Paul Reiter decided that it was going to do consulting, and it was going to do content, and it was going to do conferences.
mm.
That's actually where it came up. But coming back to the walking away from money discussion, so in 2019, I decided to walk away from the conferences piece, which at the time was a pretty large contributor to my revenue and to my brand.
Okay.
And I said that, in 2010, when I started Paul Rider, I felt super passionate about the space. But in 2019, it is changing, it is evolving. Plus, the strain of operations of finding audiences, etc. I'm not enjoying it as much anymore.
Mm, mm,
So I
mm.
decided to walk away from that. And again, it worked out really, really
Yeah.
well because if I had that business open in 2020, I'd have gone bankrupt. So
Mm,
it again turned out to be a great choice.
mm. So being connected with what is going on, rather than you have taken a 10-year back a decision and forcing it through and through. So you connected with, am I now loving it or not? And if not, then I walk away from it.
Correct. So that actually, conferences is a very ops heavy business.
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah, yeah. And physical
Right.
conferences, I
So we
remember.
were doing physical conferences,
Yeah.
webinars, the whole thing,
Mm,
but it's quite strenuous and big revenue, but it's not a heavily profitable space either. It's a lot of
mm.
fun.
And okay, so now the other question was, what would you consider as one of the biggest failure, setback, or rejection that you received and you turned around in life?
So not too many in that sense. So there have always been the small things of, you didn't get the job you wanted. Those things are always there in any organization. I think those are some of the issues that you face.
Mm,
But because it was always a plan B, I don't think they went down as badly. So
mm,
I actually did my campus placements with typhoid, which definitely was a challenge. So
okay.
I didn't get day one, day two. I think it was day three or day four. So that was quite challenging at the time.
Mm,
But since anyway, I wasn't going, I wanted advertising and no advertising agencies came, it wasn't that much of a challenge.
okay.
Um, and there have always been jobs that I wanted internally, not so once, pieces that you wanted, etc., which you don't get. But
Mm.
then, you don't get everything you want in life.
So, what would you consider as the most difficult conflict you, or any conflict you faced, and how did you walk away from it?
Yeah, so like I said, a conflict is a conflict only if you can't walk away from it.
Hmm.
But yeah, there have been difficult decisions. So I mentioned one definitely was, walking away from those beautiful
Okay.
golden ESOPs that I still
Hmm.
recollect.
Hmm.
But another one was where, I was not happy with something in the workplace, as in, I felt promises were not being kept in the professional sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I pretty much wanted to quit in a. So it was on the
Hmm.
spot decision that no, I cannot live with this. I am going to quit.
Hmm.
Um, and that was the first time I had quit without planning, without a job in
Without a
hand.
plan B. Hmm.
Yeah, without a plan B, and no idea of where to find the next job.
Hmm.
And I did need a next job. So both financially as well as from an ego perspective, I really wanted the next job.
Hmm.
So so two things happened. One is, okay, I did manage to find somebody who helped me to locate that dream job, but the compensation was a challenge
Hmm.
because I wanted value for the ESOPs that I was leaving behind. I had learned from my past mistakes, so I wanted all of that, to be
Hmm.
incorporated in this new offer.
Hmm.
And so the job offer or the intent to hire was there within, I think, the first 1 week,
Hmm.
but I think negotiation took another three,
Hmm.
and it was on complete tenterhooks because I don't have another job in hand. That one notice period is ticking away,
Hmm.
and you still have to look as if you can walk away from this one. So
Hmm.
I think that
Hmm.
was quite a learning experience because I had also had to borrow money to even exit that company to pay back the loans and you pay for your vested ESOPs. And so those days you couldn't get an ESOP loan. You had to
Hmm.
borrow money. So I literally
Okay.
went to three people because I didn't have friends rich enough to lend me all the money.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
three very sweet friends put in, put
Hmm.
in bits of it to help me rescue myself. So again, the
Hmm.
amounts weren't big, okay? It would have been, I think, 8 or 9 lakhs. But at the time, 8 or 9 lakhs hand who has?
Hmm.
So that was, I think, a fairly big conflict, so to speak. Other
Hmm.
than that, there have all been minor conflicts. And I think, I mean, so things like, oh, okay, you can't have a budget for this. So on the
Hmm.
professional level, there are many conflicts of that sort. And I think when you show that you strongly believe in it and you're willing to put a little bit of skin in the game, some of those conflicts can be addressed.
So another thing I was curious that that being willing to walk away, where do you draw the line from between arrogant versus being firm in your belief with this whole willingness to always walk away from any situation? How, where would you
Well,
draw
that
it?
would not be arrogant, right? If you were arrogant, you would insist that you were right and stick around for the fight.
Hmm. Okay.
I don't think that is the question. The question should be more like, at what point is walking away like an act of cowardice or a lack of belief in the system, etc.
Hmm. Hmm.
It
Hmm.
was all, until probably mid 30s, late 30s, that was probably a question I had. But after that, you realize that, look, the purpose of life is to be happy.
Hmm.
So if the situation makes you unhappy and after a couple of attempts you're unable to change it, then you might as well just move on.
See, I think I have a one question that there may be a whole lot of people watching this video, or many of them, who are choosing to stay on without really enjoying, loving whatever they are in. That means they are not at their sweet spot, and they know it. So,
Mm-hmm.
what would you advise them to give them some inner power and encouragement, something which, because I have, my learning has been, when people are at their sweet spot, they really do much better than wherever they were, and they are happier. Their people are wherever they are, that place is blossoming. Versus here, they are blocking someone else's place in some way. So, what would you recommend?
I played it both ways. So, in my first job, I had a boss who basically said that you should never leave a job because someone else wants you to. So, at the lower end of the pyramid, when you work when you're part of the bottom of the pyramid, literally in the company, there
Mm,
are a lot of people who want your job or feel that you're getting some preference that they should have. And so
mm,
it's a pretty noisy space out there.
mm, mm,
And your degrees of freedom are constrained. So you can't
mm,
actually walk away from this person so easily.
mm,
So
mm,
his advice held me in good stead for a very long time of saying that no, I'm not going because you don't want me around,
mm, mm, mm.
right? And I have worked in organizations where structurally there were three marketing departments and no definition as to who does what.
Oh,
Let
okay.
the best person win.
Wow.
So it's like, okay, I want to build a website. But that department also said they want to build a website. Okay, both of you build a website. We'll see which one is better. Okay, it
Mm,
was operating at that kind of cowboy fashion.
mm, mm,
um so then you're like, no, my website will be the best, and I am not giving up this portfolio and so on.
mm.
So when you're in the empire building phase, I think you do have to put up with territory wars. So when you say that
Okay.
someone is unhappy and wants to leave,
Mm,
it's a question of, is it an internal fit problem or is it a
mm,
territory fight?
mm,
Right.
mm.
So I
Okay.
am, let's say, best salesperson. My boss is refusing to let go of his position because he can't find a better job. That is an, external fit problem. It is
Mm,
not because I am bad in any way.
mm,
But
mm,
if it is a situation that you're a good salesperson, but you hate sales and you would much rather take a pay cut and go into product management,
mm,
then it's an internal problem that needs to be addressed and you find
mm,
your sweet spot. So I think the sweet spot, the question to be asked is it somebody else's sweet spot that I'm sitting on,
mhm.
because I'm not, geared for it, or is it somebody else's sweet spot because they have put their kerchief and said it is mine, right?
Mm,
If it is
mm,
a kerchief war, you should fight it out. But if it is an internal war, then you think through and say, okay, I really hate this job.
mm,
But
mm,
coming back to that, degrees of freedom to a large part is influenced by your financial ability to walk away.
mm, mm.
And
So,
as soon as you have a mortgage, as soon as you have financial commitments, it gets harder.
mm,
And there again, I'm all for working women on two counts. One
mhm,
is for the woman itself, you will have financial independence.
mm,
And if you choose to get married, then you also, can support your spouse if he or she wants to leave.
mm, mm. Wow, that is another interesting way to look at. Okay, so another question, maybe you might have covered it in some way. Any other dilemma you faced, a most difficult decision, not really conflict, but any decision you kept on thinking whole night or something, and then took a call.
Yeah, so I'm doing this interview from second home in Amsterdam. This was certainly a big change for me
Okay.
because throughout my stint in the IT industry, I refused to budge despite opportunities to go to US and so on. I
Mm,
kept saying, nah, I'm okay, I'm happy in India, happy in India. So it's a bit of a late decision to say, okay, let us experience, what is it to work outside and so on.
mm,
And it turned out to be pretty interesting because the original plan was that I would divide my time equally in a month between Bangalore and Amsterdam.
mm,
But thanks to COVID, that has not worked out.
mm,
So after the first 6 months of railing about it and so on, I've now kind of pivoted and figured out that you can run everything virtually.
mhm.
But making the decision was a big step. But once a decision was made, I think the experience is really good for us as a family.
Mm. So the next question is, what has kept you anchored in turbulent times?
So
Uh,
I think that's always to do with the spouse. So definitely the ability to rely on him to provide support. And
mm,
he has a Bengali saying that his mom actually brought out, which is, two can live as cheaply as one. Basically, if you have one handful of rice, it can spread around. So to have
mm,
that confidence and say, okay, doesn't matter if business fails, go for it. Doesn't matter if this doesn't happen, go for it. I think that is a big confidence, and it gives you the plan B.
mm. This is
It
a
gives you
little,
the confidence to succeed, to
mm, a
know that
little
you can fail.
So this is a little personal question, so to say. Maybe few lines you can say. What created this kind of a connection in your relationship? What would be one or two things which really created that solid connection where you can experience your spouse as your anchor?
So I really don't know. I mean, I'm not a relationship guru by any means. But I think we have a lot in common, plus we have some complementary bits, and I think that fits together.
Mm,
Um, so we knew that we wanted to get married in, I think, the first 2 weeks itself. So there was
mhm,
an instant connection, and it has grown. But it's also to mutually support each other, not just
mm,
personally, but professionally. So my husband has also done an entrepreneurial stint, so have I. So, you need to also be willing to give the other person a little bit of space.
mm.
And that can happen more if both of you perceive each other as equals.
Yes. Mm. So now let's come to your book, and tell me more about the, maybe a little bit about the previous book, and then more about whatever the current launch,
So,
and why should people read it?
like every author, I'm prepared for this question. Here's a picture of my last book.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the context of the book,
Just show the book again. I'll let it stay for, if
here
I
we
can. uh, it's no money marketing. Yes.
go. Yes.
Mm,
Okay.
okay. Mm,
And it has a website, nomoneymarketing.com. So
mm,
you can go check it out. Um, so the context of the book was really twofold, actually. So this was 2008 that I was thinking about it and thinking about my personal brand, actually.
mm,
And it's very convenient to go around saying I'm the CMO of Wipro and all doors open for you. And the advice I had received from my mentors, and at the time I literally had like an advisory board, I'm really grateful to them, is that if you start your own company, this is the one thing you're going to miss, because why should somebody meet you when you don't say I am CMO of Wipro, etc.? What's in it for them?
mm,
And so that made a lot of sense. And I had seen a lot of people go through their life, saying X something when they had worked there 20 years before.
mm,
So I
mm,
did not want that. And I thought about, what would shortcut that process for me. And I felt saying you're the author of a book on marketing sounded like a good way to claim credibility in a certain space.
mm, mm, mm,
So that was one driver. The second was that, so because of when I joined the IT industry, we had grown together and it was a very frugal mindset. And initially,
mm,
it was because we genuinely didn't have any money. So you wanted to compete with Accenture. And, at the time when we said that, Accenture's revenue was sort of, marketing budget was sort of equal to our revenue.
oh,
So you're like, okay, you want to compete with them. How do we compete? It was literally David Goliath kind of a story. So, and later on, it became like a mindset saying that we don't want to waste money. We will spend what is appropriate. So I wanted to take some of those learnings and crystallize it and offer it to others in the same boat.
mm,
So the book actually has a bunch of frameworks in it which could be used. And this was when the first book was done.
mm, mm,
And a lot of people have come back saying it's super helpful. I have used this chapter to build my company, or this I did not know.
mm,
So, but then I got a little engaged with my own business and really didn't think of writing a second version of the book.
mm,
But then I felt 10 years again, every 10 years I feel I need to crystallize my knowledge.
mm,
And I wanted to do this book because I feel the appeal for the David Goliath story is far more prevalent in India today. And
mm,
not just in IT services, but across industries. There are companies. And if you look at the landscape of India, there in every industry, FMCG, anything, there will be maybe one, like top three players will control maybe 50 to 60% of the market share.
mm,
Fair
mm,
enough. But even if I am able to carve out 1% of that market, I am around, I'm at least a 500 crore company. So
mm,
depending on what you pick, detergent, soap, whatever. So any industry in India, if you can get even 1% market share of the domestic space, you are still a large company. But you're
Mm,
competing obviously with the big guys. So, how do you go about it? The playbook is one route. The second is while the original book was written very much in the background of IT services,
mm,
today India has a very vibrant IT product community.
okay.
And some are really successful. And the next wave is going to be B2B SaaS.
Mm,
So the book, the new version of the book is also, to address their specific requirements. So it's updated, but with these kind of targets in mind. And because now it's so much easier to, modularize and digitize the learning as well. So this time I want to do it a little differently, where there is a book which has the, complete collection of learning, but I also want to make it an ongoing conversation. If people want to join in, to have a 30-minute conversation on a topic, then I
mm.
would be available through the website.
Okay, so another question I had, that you had this 480, publishing 480 every week. This is every week, or
No, no, 480 pieces. So it's a newsletter which goes out every week and it has
yeah.
crossed 485 views.
Yeah, yeah. So what kept that going for you? It's not easy. Now you look back, you see, okay, every week she wrote it. But and I've seen the quality. It's a very very latest. So what is going on few days back? That's what is in the newsletter. It is very creative. It is very crisp. So what kept that on for you?
So, like I always said, I like an audience. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I enjoy the conversation with an audience. And so the newsletter writing started, I think I wrote my first one probably in 98 or 99 in Infosys. It was an
Mm,
internal newsletter. And I started writing it because nobody was giving marketing time of day. So we would want, people to give us inputs, approvals, whatever. And nobody was reading this thing. One more mail, no one wanted to read it. So I started
mm,
writing a newsletter which was creative and would have headlines like, if you do not read this, you won't know what you were supposed to do, you know, so all kinds of stuff. And so people
mm,
would come back and say, okay, fine, I read your newsletter and I did your action items. So then I took
mm,
it forward with me to iGate and then to Wipro. Wipro, it became the 10 big things of marketing.
mm,
So it was a way to engage with people. And, I get amazing feedback like, okay, I get 100 emails from this company, but I read yours because yours is personal.
mm, mm,
And so when, I started this in Paul Writer, it's the same thing. I just want to talk to people and there is no monetization. So my newsletters never sell anything. And I've
mm, mm.
consciously stayed away. So many people actually don't know what I do for a living. They read the newsletter and that's it.
They keep wondering.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. What do I actually do is just a newsletter. But every now and then, I try to make it conscious and, okay, I have a plan, we'll talk about this. But that's not why people read it. They read it because it's just fun.
Mm,
And from a business benefits perspective, sure, my thing is the only thing is for many people, I am the only person they know in marketing. And if you have a need for marketing, yeah, okay, you'll find me, in your mailbox. But that's not why I write it. I actually write it because I enjoy the feedback. I enjoy talking about these things. And when, as a writer, you feel you can change someone else's thinking,
mm,
that's an amazing high. Right? So I wrote about why I don't like Women's Day celebrations anymore. And
mm,
I also shared some posts on LinkedIn, which were ads. Like there was a really nice ad by Paytm on,
mm.
equality or financial literacy.
I remember that. Yeah. Mm,
Right. So one person had commented on that saying that, okay, you're right. I'm going to make a change at home. I understand that I have been saying I'll do all of these, but it's
mm,
wrong. So if you've changed one person's mind and it takes me 1 hour to write this,
mm,
it's worth it, right? Or, people come back saying that, oh, okay, you gave this advice in your newsletter and I followed it. It worked for me.
mm.
So that's enough. It's just a way to stay in touch. As a child, I used to have pen pals in the days when people still,
Okay.
yeah.
So you collect the stamps anyway.
Correct. So I had one in Australia, which was when we were living there, and I stayed in touch with her for so many years.
Wow.
And one in Malta, who I'm now connected with on Facebook, and one in London, whom I've lost touch with. But it was the same thing, right? The novelty of reaching out to a quasi stranger, and then you get to know them through your newsletters or your letters. So that's what's happened with the newsletter. I mean, some people know me only through that, and I know them only through that.
Mm. So
So much
what
so
is
that we had a neighbor who bumped into me in the lift and was like, you're Jessie Paul? Like, yeah, excuse the 90, but yeah, that's me. Yeah, okay, I didn't realize it was you. I've been subscribing to your newsletter.
So any unusual or absurd hobby or activity that you do and you love?
So it varies by, I think every decade it could change. Um, so I don't have anything truly absurd or weird, but I like to hang around social media. I find it interesting. I actually find Facebook groups quite interesting for myself. So I'm what I would call a social media junkie. So I have a Clubhouse account, Twitter account, LinkedIn, Facebook. My latest group on Facebook is the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which
Mhm.
is a super cool group to hang out with. So I like to explore new communities, and that's one I wouldn't say absurd, but fun.
Mm.
For a long time, I was a online Scrabble junkie as well,
Okay.
but now it's a little harder to play the system. And the interruptions penalize you for your score, so that became an issue.
Hmm. So any ritual that you have followed over years which has helped you?
I really thought about it and thought about it, and other than brushing my teeth, I couldn't come up with anything.
What are you looking forward in your life now?
So, this is the first decade when I don't have a plan. So, that's kind of what I'm grappling with right now. I need to figure out what do I really want to do, and that's actually what am I looking forward to now is figuring out what do I really want to do. I think COVID has been a learning experience and realizing that you can do what you want in a physically independent location, as in you don't have to be based in Bangalore or Amsterdam or whatever. The world is virtual, you can do what you like,
Mm,
and do everything. So, board meetings are online, my business is online, consulting has happened online, so education has happened online. So I think how do you take that and do something that excites you is the next thing. From what do I want to achieve? I think I would like a larger canvas to do whatever I'm currently doing.
mhm,
It's a question of scaling up, and more return for the effort is how I would quantify what I want to do for the next 10 years.
mhm,
And on the family front, obviously, I mean, I need time to walk the dog, I need time to hang around the beach. All of that stuff is, of course, very important in these next 10 years as well.
mm. Okay, and final question is what advice would you give to a smart driven leader or an entrepreneur? And you can maybe we can add to a lot of women who are maybe stopping themselves in track somewhere. So you can answer that as well in the end.
So I think one is to realize that you can't have it all. And I go
Mm,
against everybody who says you can have it all. You can't. Nobody can. It's not a gender thing. Um, it's like the kid who's really good at maths is not usually the best in English, and vice versa. I mean, with some effort, they get there. So, similarly, it's very hard for you to say that I'm going to be the best salesperson, the best entrepreneur, and the best parent, and the best chef, and not going to happen. So, you should prioritize and say, what is it that I really want to be best at this point in time?
mhm,
So really hard for you to say I'm going to be the best mother and the best business person and the best, giver back to society. You'll have to choose one and something will not be the best. So live with it. So I'm a lousy cook and I'm proud of it.
mm,
And it's a conscious call that I took years ago.
mm,
And in fact, only COVID we started cooking, and that was such a disaster because we obviously went overboard with the ghee and the biryanis and whatever. So I think make peace with prioritization would be one advice I can give people.
mm,
Choose which metric matters most, focus on that. Say 5 years, this is going to be my focus. And
mm,
try not to let the other things fall apart too much, but they can be the second best. But you're not going to be the best, and live without guilt having made that decision.
mm,
Second is, again, I keep talking about it, financial independence can give you the confidence that you need.
mm,
So, for those who want to embark on an entrepreneurial journey, check if you have the staying power for even a year. So, I like to say that, Paul Reiter was funded out of my PF,
mm,
right? So, at least that money was enough to last for a couple of years. So, you're like, good. I mean, worst case, fine, I lost my PF and I came back, but that was it.
mm,
So, the more risk and the more panic you have, the harder it is. Not saying you can't do it,
mm,
but it depends on your life stage as well. So
mm,
when you
mm.
have no liabilities or dependents, it's all easy.
And okay, any final advice to the women listeners?
So for the women listeners, I think stop thinking that you're a woman and I can do, can't do, whatever it is. I mean, I think the first step is to just stop saying, oh, women leaders, women listeners. Let's just move
Mm.
on.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think it has been very, very interesting. And the walk away from money, walk towards what you love, and also make yourself financially independent so that you can do all of this a lot more easily. And all that, how you handle different things in your life. I think it is going to be very inspiring and useful for the audience. So thank you once again for
Thanks so
your
much for
time.
having me. It's been great talking to you.